What's going on, everyone? Sid Gordon here, Core Medical Group Podcast. And today I have a very exciting guest, very accomplished man. Was at the Core Medical event this year. Couldn't help it wanting to have him on, my boy Jason over here. So, Jason, thanks for coming on, brother.
What's going on, Sid? How you doing? I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for having me.
It's great. So, with the core team and the core family, it's interesting. Like the more time that goes by, we start to build these relationships with our patients, and my team does a really good job of really digging deep and making sure that we understand who we're working with, and with that we get a lot of support. And Jason, you've been awesome. Like you support Core Medical Group, you refer to Core Medical Group, so I just wanted to thank you so much for that. Super important to us. The biggest compliment we can get is a referral and a teammate like yourself at Core, so thank you so much. But first, just wanted to start off. Give me a little background on yourself, what your childhood looked like, growth into the adult world, any sports or hobbies that you might have, and we'll go from there, brother.
Sure. So, Jason Warren, firefighter, paramedic. I've been in fire and EMS for 11 years. I grew up in rural New Hampshire, up in New England. Most people don't know where New Hampshire is. Usually have to tell them it's the one upside down by Vermont. Um, yeah, up until recently, actually, if you asked me how my childhood was, I'd probably tell you it was fairly normal and standard. But I've been going through a lot of growth and transformation over the last few years, in particularly, and dabbled in some therapy over the last few months, and I realized my childhood wasn't really that normal. I went through a lot of adversity and my fair share of trauma when I was a kid. Growing up, grew up in a first responder household. My dad was a cop for more years than I've been alive. He's been doing it now for 40 years. He's still going. So I grew up early figuring out what it was like to kind of have a father who wasn't home a lot, because he was out serving the community as a cop, doing what he had to do to provide for his family, make sure we had a roof over our head and food on the table. But one of the side effects of that is, I didn't have a lot of that stability, guidance, mentorship early on in life. Having that father figure who was, there emotionally and physically to help guide me along the way. So went through some adversity and trauma, like I said, when I was a kid. I like to think of it now as kind of preparing me for the type of individual that I become now, kind of like a training grounds, to help prepare me to do the things that I'm doing now, and trying to help inspire other people who have experienced similar things to, go through their own healing journey, more specifically first responders. Because one of the things I've found in all of this is that there's a common thread that I've been finding in first responders, paramedics, firefighters, people in law enforcement, is that we always tend to have some sort of connection to our childhood as far as traumatic events or adversity, or this desire to want to control chaos and make things better for other people, and kind of provide safety and provide that space for other people, and kind of helps push us into these careers as first responders. So I went through a lot of that in my childhood. Grew up, went to high school, went to Plymouth Regional High School, didn't serve in the military.
Did you grow up in Plymouth, New Hampshire?
In the area of Plymouth, New Hampshire, yeah.
So I spent my childhood up there.
Yeah, you were
Yeah,
telling me that once.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah, yeah,
Small world.
yeah.
Yeah, I used to go to Waterville Valley. You said you used to ski and stuff, right?
I skied for the freestyle team there. Yep, my
Yeah.
childhood for some time, then ended up at Gould Academy and then Killington Mountain School. But
Okay. Yeah. Nice. Yeah, I went to Waterville Valley and Loon Mountain a lot when I was a kid.
yeah,
Snowboarded quite a bit.
cool.
Uh, Not so much anymore, but so yeah, did that. Didn't serve in the military at that point. I didn't have a lot of that mentorship and guidance to push me on that path. So I kind of spent a few years living fast, living kind of irresponsible. Got myself into the food service industry because one of the things, when you're from that area is you either get into a trade or you go into the restaurants. It's kind of like the thing up in New England.
Hmm.
So I did that for a few years, and then eventually found that calling deep inside to do more. I wanted to serve more. Came from that, that kind of heritage in my family of service, and then eventually got into the fire service and into EMS and transitioned out of that.
So Let me ask you something. This is a question I ask quite a bit. From the time that you entered into being a first responder, a firefighter, until now, how vastly different has that world become? And do you think it's changed for the better? What type of changes have you seen over that decade that you've been a responder?
Yeah, so 11 years, I guess I don't have a huge barometer to gauge how different it was, from back in the day from to till now, but there's definitely things that haven't changed, I can tell you that, like the acceptance of mental health and, breaking through that stigma of always having to be stoic and hardcore and not talk about our feelings, which, unfortunately just leads to a lot of mental health issues amongst first responders, not taking care of ourselves, which manifests itself into not showing up for our families,
Uh-huh.
and that's is part of my story. And, where I came from through all of this is I wasn't serving my kids like I should have as a father, wasn't serving my wife like I should have, wasn't showing up. I was living in my victim story,
Hmm.
through the experiences I was having on the job throughout the years, all those traumatic calls that started to affect me. I lived in that whole PTSD mindset, and I thought that was my life. So as far as like big changes in the career field, there hasn't been much. I mean, there's been a lot of stuff
Yep.
post pandemic as far as COVID, but
Hmm. Well, that's actually the reason why I asked that question because, as you know, core is a huge. It just tries to get as involved as much as possible with the veterans, active duty service members, and now over the last 2 years, after breaking into that community, now my goal is to serve more and help more with the first responders. You've probably heard the story before, but it was like a 5 year battle to get my foot in the door with the U.S. military, and we've accomplished that more than pretty much anyone else that's in this industry, and we're held in very high regard there. And one of the things that I've really noticed, my best friends are, SF guys, super high operators, veterans. Um, and, the one thing that has bothered me the most is the amount of support that they have. But it's interesting because I've also responded back to, well, you haven't got too much support from mental health side of things, but how aggressively have you asked for it? Have you pushed for it? Are you communicating about it? And I feel it to be a common trend simply because of the alpha male that typically takes over the responsibility of being a responder like yourself.
yeah, absolutely. And it is getting better. I think in our culture and in our industry, we have more people stepping up and voicing, the fact that this is critically important for us. That we can't just depend on being physically fit. We have to get mentally fit, because if we're not mentally fit, we're not going to be able to show up as our 100% optimized version for those people who we promise to serve and protect and to be there on their worst day.
Uh-huh.
you know and then again, that serving ourselves, at home as fathers and husbands and spouses and all of that. So there's been a good decent push, I think, in our culture to normalize the mental health conversation. I don't think we're there quite yet. I
Uh-huh.
think, again, we're getting better. um but into the mental health stuff, I often ask, because I've had such a positive impact with getting my hormones optimized and getting my lab work done and realizing all of these deficiencies that I had, of how many people, how many of our first responders are struggling, or made that final decision, and if they had just had that help they got that resource that they needed,
Mhm.
or they just did something as simple as looking into their blood work and their hormones.
Yep.
I often wonder how many more people would be around.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, that's that's like the biggest thing. I'm on this journey with my veterans, and hopefully soon a bigger journey. We have a few hundred first responders across the country, and we've thousands of active duty services and vets. Um, and I'm on this journey with the VA. and the people that are using the VA, and they you know they go in and they're just getting pillowcases full of pills that are actually not helpful in any way, shape, or form. You know they're suppressing their hormones and you know destroying mental cognizance for the vets simply to make them numb, and that's essentially causing a ripple effect of that man or that female not being able to play with their kids properly, speak to their wife properly, have a solid job, grow in the civilian world, and you know my big message out there is most of the time, and the majority of people that commit suicide in the first responder world, in the veteran world, have suppressed testosterone. The majority, and that's such an easy fix, but instead it's not being documented properly. It's not being handled properly in any way, shape, or form. And for me, it's kind of heartbreaking, you know, because we do a really good job of vetting patients to see where they are mentally. But I mean, we've had a lot of guys commit suicide that have been patients at core, and it's like, it's crazy because number one, for the people listening to this, when you're going on, when you're in that depression and you're drinking and you're using other drugs and you're taking Valium and Xanax and a painkiller for your shoulders and because you're just beat up, when you transition from and you want to transition from that unhealthy lifestyle to balancing your hormones, you're in a real jam. You're in a real big jam because you just can't come off those drugs. You know, Xanax is the only drug that can really kill you detoxing off of. So prior to going on that stuff, I beg you, get your hormones checked and try that avenue first because it's really hard to do it the other way. So,
Yeah, it's the benzodiazepines, the SSRIs, all of those. They have such crazy side effects. I don't think a lot of people understand, especially when you start mixing them together. Like you said, it creates these secondary and tertiary effects that are like almost worse than the initial condition that they were suffering from.
yeah, the hard part too, right, is my best friend you met at the event, John Morris, has been a firefighter for 18 years in Newton, Massachusetts, right outside of Boston. They support the inner city, they support the surrounding areas, and the over the last 4 or 5 years, and you can maybe uh, give me some more information on this, but over the last few years, he's been seeing so much more horrific things going on due to the fact that not only he's a firefighter, but he's responding to like massive fentanyl overdoses and seeing kids dying, and it's just these micro traumas that are turning into major trauma is really affecting his team. Um, are you seeing things similar to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things about the first responder type of mentality is that, like you said, it's the micro traumas over time. You're experiencing all of these events. It doesn't have to be this massive one traumatic event, and you're seeing continual just tragedy, loss, and suffering because that's part of the job. And you know, the weird thing about it is that you're supposed to deal and mitigate with these things and then go home to your family the next day and integrate into family life and again show up as a father and a husband, and it's hard because 24 hours ago you were just seeing some of the worst stuff you've ever experienced. You're seeing the underbelly of society. You're seeing just this dark, twisted side of the world that a lot of people don't see.
Well, the funny thing too is that I was talking about this with another buddy of mine. If you think about it, the the country as a whole, people that are in charge are, in my opinion, allowing these drugs very easily into this country, right?
Yep.
And they're not even taking into consideration, right? Not only are people dying, but the people that are trying to help the situation are also being thrown into that world, and it's causing them to die because of the amount of trauma that they're seeing. And the that ripple effect again of, well, all right, well, you don't only have these kids overdosing, you have these men and women that are trying to be community servants that are having to deal with it, and there's really not as much support there. So it's just it's a vicious cycle when you really slow down and think about it. And there's there's there has to be a better solutions, I think, but at the same time, the solutions really, I think, need to start, at the beginning phase, because right now the way things are going, we're in complete chaos, and you guys are the people that are really ending up with a short end of the stick. So, for me, my question is after you go see something just horrific like that, what is the protocol? Like, is like when you walk into a house to where just the worst thing in the world you can imagine that you see. You're just expected to get back on the truck or get back on in the vehicle and leave and go back. Is there anything that you guys do special after going through something like that?
Luckily, again, that's kind of another thing that's shifting, I think, in our culture. It used to be a lot worse and it's getting better at a lot of departments. Again, it's still not where it should be at a lot of departments. Depending on the type of situation, you'll trigger something called a CISD meeting, which is a critical incident stress debriefing. It's a very kind of formal, more of a checkbox type of thing where you gather around, kind of, hot wash the whole thing and move on. And from my experience, they've never been super effective. Um, and other than that, I know some departments are starting to get more on board and more progressive with, taking units out of service, letting guys go home, if they've experienced something, negative without any questions asked. But unfortunately, I think those types of departments are more of the rare type of exception rather than the standard rule that it should be. So, but as far as like the mental health stuff, I think in the department, it just takes individuals who are willing again to just step up and be vulnerable and realize that you can still have grit and tenacity. You can still be, a hardcore type of guy, alpha type of personality, but also say, you know what, guys, what we just went through was pretty messed up. How's everybody doing? I'm not feeling okay. How are you feeling?
Yeah.
And just showing that side of it that, it's normal to not feel okay about this stuff, but it's not okay to let yourself dwell in it. And it's not okay to let it start affecting your life to the point where you're bringing it home and then, experiencing all of those victim stories like I did for so long.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of interesting. You just made me think of something. So, when I grew up, blue collar area, a lot of my friends' parents were firefighters and police officers and EMT, and some of them in Boston, and with the in the 80s and 90s, Boston wasn't what it is today. You had your Dorchester and Roxbury and Mattapan that wasn't as pretty as it is now, and you meet like your buddy's parent or whatever, and the dad was just an angry, miserable man that just was like just drinking beer and upset all the time. And you're like, wow, that guy's a fucking dick, you know? And now that I'm going back and thinking about after, kind of this conversation, I'm like, wow, that guy probably just had no outlets. Like they just had none whatsoever. And didn't know that like there back then, there wasn't communication like the kind of communication you're talking about now. And people would just judge them, but based on their interaction, but not based on the interactions that they've probably had prior to your engagement and the things that they've seen over the period of time in their life. So that's super interesting. Can I ask, what do you do personally when you come off of a call that's just rough? Like, do you have your own personal like protocol or like steps that you take to kind of decompress and is there like one other dude that you just like talk to? Do you talk with your wife? Like, talk to me about that because I think that's important. Because I know you do bring a lot of value to the community, which we'll talk about here shortly. But if you don't mind getting a little vulnerable and giving some secrets, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I believe wholeheartedly, and this is something that I've learned in my journey, that it all starts with the preparation. You need to build the mind, body, spirit resilience on the front end. And that's what we don't do enough of because we always think that we're going to be able to react to the trauma after it happens. But it's like anything else in life. If we don't build a strong body, if we don't build a strong mind, those things are going to rock our worlds a lot more than they could if we had done the work on the front end. But as far as like what I do now, It's
Can give me an example of like an exercise or something that you do to build that mindset? Just to get a little bit deeper into that. Like, so if I'm a guy that has been on the force for 5 or 6 years, I come to you and I'm like, Jason, man, I'm having a hard time here. Where do I start to change my mental uh, demeanor? Where do I start to change my way of thinking? How do I make my brain stronger? How do I get more grounded dealing with these situations? Like, what's your answer to that?
So for me, it started with some gratitude and presence, just really breaking it down to the simple things and realizing that no matter how bad or how chaotic everything was around me, if I just took a moment to breathe and do some breath work, meditate, get into some journaling, and really just dive deep inside my mind, I could find something that I had in my life that I was grateful for. And it always resulted back to my family, my kids, my wife, my health,
Uh-huh.
those things. So once you start staying grounded in gratitude, you realize that, you're just a player in this big game, that it wasn't your fault, that you did the best you could, you showed up as well equipped and well trained as you could, but sometimes the results are out of your hands. And then from there, it's just trying to stay present in the moment as much as possible. That was
Uh-huh.
another thing that I started to do. And I found that in breath work, in meditation, and realizing that my life is so short that if I didn't start getting my act together and didn't stop living in my victim story of my trauma and my PTSD, that, I was going to reach the end of my life and just have all these regrets that I wasted a bunch of time.
Yeah.
So getting into the cold water was another thing that I'd started to do that helped bring that presence, because it was just like a reset for my mind, just instantaneously. So I get in the cold water as much as I can, try to 4 to 5 times a week. Builds a lot of mental resilience. It has a lot of physical benefits as well.
Uh-huh.
It just helps eliminate the stress, the anxiety. I always say it's better than any pharmaceutical you could take for stress and anxiety.
Hmm.
I started training Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. That was another thing I started to do that really helped get my mindset right. And it's just building those foundational building blocks, I think, that help you get through those tough times. And then you realize that, you've built that strength and that resilience. So those traumatic events aren't, they're not affecting you as much.
The it's interesting because that I've been surrounded by a lot of greatness, similar to yourself, of guys that have, like Nick K, one of my like I'm super proud of him. Cody, um, they both are very vulnerable with me, and they've opened up quite a bit to me, and it's like amazing because like they I sometimes have some great input. Sometimes I'm just there to listen. The common theme is sitting behind a bar stool isn't going to fix the issue at hand. If anything, it's going to make it 10 times worse. And, filling your day, staying, I don't like the answer staying busy to get your mind off things. I kind of like the answer of doing things in the community to where you're busy, but you're surrounded by others and have the ability to help others. Whenever I'm having a hard day, I look immediately to just maybe take a staff member I can tell is having a rough day out to lunch that day. Spending time in a cold plunge. I'm the same as you. I'm in the morning for 30 seconds, and then in the evening for 3 to 4 minutes. And that time in there in that plunge, it doesn't get easier, in my opinion, if you're doing it right. Right? So it's still fucking freezing every time, but we learn to deal with that pain. But that time in that plunge really hits that reset button for me every single day. And on top of that, like doing some things as a community outside of your comfort zone. Like I just said, I just ran a half marathon with like 8 dudes from core, and no one has ever run more than 4 miles that ran the race. But like you had so much gratitude. It was so fulfilling at the end of that. You don't get that from being in a negative lifestyle. It's impossible. All that's doing is hitting a temporary button that turns back on the next day, and you're right back to where you started. Those milestones of achievement give you more mental capability to grow, and then you get more addicted to that than anything else. Like, I love to challenge myself. I love to suffer. Like, there's you think the last thing I want to do is get out of my warm bed and go straight within 10 minutes into a freezing cold bath? No, that's probably the worst thing I'm going to do that day. Physically, it sucks, but I do it just to keep myself in a routine. And that's my like next angle. With it, pretty much everybody that I have on here that we talk about overall health. Um, I love to hear about their routines because the common practice and the common thing is like I know what like Nick K and Cody are doing like pretty much every second of the day. Like they're in that routine, right? There's certain things that they do during the day that happen every single day because consistency, in my opinion, is a big piece of being a man, being consistent. So you want to talk about that a little bit for me?
Yeah, absolutely. The routine drives the purpose in the day, I think. And, I've struggled a lot with routines. It get so easy to get in your head, or like if you miss something on your routine to spin out of control and let it kind of like affect your day. So I've tried to give myself a little grace when it comes to the routine, but I do definitely try to do some of the same things every day. I try to wake up at a reasonable hour. I used to do the whole Jocko, I got to wake up at 4 in the morning every day. But then it's like,
Yeah.
well, sleep hygiene is also really important too. So I try to give myself a little latitude there. Wake up at a good hour. Just start my day staying grounded. I pray now every morning, just 20 seconds to a minute, whatever. I just for whatever reason that helps kind of just set my mind in that mindset that I need to be in to go forth with a higher purpose than myself. It gets kind of that selfish, self-fulfilling mood out of me in the morning, and then just drink some water. I like to get into the ice bath for 2 minutes, and 100 push-ups is like at least my bare minimum morning workout, just in case life gets busy or chaotic and I don't get to get my workout in that morning or whatever. And then I like to just journal a little bit, write down some things I'm grateful for. And then more importantly, I try to connect with my kids and my wife as much as I can in the morning. That's part of, you know, that old me that wasn't serving my family as much as I should be. I try to be there for my kids, help send them off to school, help the wife out, and then start my day.
I've noticed my relationship with my wife and my kids when I get up in the morning and I'm not like in this massive rush has changed dramatically. Like, cause um, I was married before, and when I my first marriage, it ended in complete chaos. But my place in that was that I wasn't really present. I'd get up at 5, be at the gym by 6, and wouldn't be home again. Didn't see my kids, didn't see my wife until I got home at 8:30 from starting core medical 15 years ago, completely exhausted, worn out, and I'd repeat that process 6 days a week. Then Sundays, all I wanted to do was kind of sit on the sofa and relax when they didn't have, they didn't really have me there. Even though I was there, I wasn't really there because I was in this very, very selfish place. Um, Now, I'm not going to say that when you start a brand new business, your family isn't suffers the most because it does, right? So I mean, they're the ones that are putting up with either a husband or a wife grinding, taking every possible way to make the business better to support their family. But at the same time, there is definitely some negativity that falls with that. Instead of me communicating back in the day and saying, "Hey, listen, this is going to suck real hard for the next 5 years. What do you need from me during that period of time, so that I can make sure that I'm providing that, rather than just saying it's going to be my way." That for you guys out there, my way did not work. It causes people to be astray. It causes people to have resentment, and you can avoid both of those things from communication. And I'm curious to see. I know that you've developed quite a bit over the years. Have you experienced similar experiences like that?
Oh, absolutely. And I think there's a clear difference between temporary sacrifice in order to build something like a business, or to get yourself in a position to better serve your family, and being completely absorbed and identified in a thing. And that's how I used to be, because I used to be 100% identified with my career. I was wholeheartedly identified with being a firefighter paramedic, and I was doing everything that I could to become a better one, and to just engross myself into the career. And so many guys and gals in our professions do the same thing, and they burn the candle at both ends. They work endless amounts of overtime. They're never home, but they're trying to provide for their family. But at the same time, it's burning their family. They're creating that gap between them and their family. The relationship that they should be building is actually becoming worse.
Uh-huh.
The people who care about them the most are the ones who are suffering the most as they wait for them at home, while we spend all of our time at the firehouse or at the department, because it's just that cultural identity to the thing we do. And it's so scary to lose that we almost sometimes get deeper and deeper into it if we don't step back and realize, like, wow, my family is the most important thing I have. You know, the
Uh-huh.
brotherhood and the people that I work with at the job, they're great, but I've seen it personally, having colleagues pass away, and these people are forgotten about in a month. And if they're lucky, they'll have a park bench named after them or a tree planted in their honor. But the people who are going to remember them forever and how they showed up or how they didn't show up, those are the ones we end up ignoring the most, our family members.
What was the pivotal point, the turning point where you're just like, you know what, fuck this shit. I'm like, I'm making a change. Like, and I know that change is really hard, man. I mean, I have I have not ever been a first responder, but I have um, definitely been a neglecting father. I'm still working to this day to have a better relationship with my oldest daughter. I mean, it's light years better than it was, but there's a lot of resentment when your kid is in the car with you, and the second you pick her up at school, you're on the phone from the second that you get home, and there was like no communication there. There's resentment when you're too busy to show up to a dance recital. There's resentment when you're not there to say goodnight to her, and you're not there to say good morning. And that's kind of the shit that like, pushed me in a direction of like I needed to find better balance. How about yourself? What was that turning point?
I was just at rock bottom at life. I was depressed, constantly feeling anxious, just sitting around at home, apathetic, no energy, just in this constant fog. I was obese. I'd gained a ton of weight. I was like at my heaviest, like almost 260, and not like a healthy jacked 260, you know, uh, full just alcoholic, drinking myself into oblivion, because it was just those coping mechanisms to try to handle that darkness that I was experiencing. And then just seeing those behaviors in my children of, like, dad's a stranger,
Oh,
or recognizing that I was doing all of these things generationally, kind of continuing these cycles with the way my kids were behaving or acting or the things they were saying. And I'm just like, man, I'm failing these kids. I'm not showing up the way I should. The relationship with my wife, it was becoming cold and distant, and she was just doing the best she could to keep the house together, you know? And that was kind of my wake up call when I was sitting around on the couch being like, wow, okay, so I invested all this energy into a career, but my life literally sucks and is falling down. It's falling apart around me. And I was just leaving a trail of destruction everywhere I went. So that's kind of what pushed me down this wake up call for me, and starting to get my life together. And it was like following people like Cody and Nick, and seeing what they were doing, and getting engrossed in the content that they were sharing. And it was like, okay, so there's a way out of this,
uh-huh.
you know?
Did did you have anyone calling you out at the time? Because like for me, this is why my circle of friends I have a lot of friends, but I have a certain circle of friends that like don't care how successful I've become. But when I get off track, they'll like Mel call me up and be like, Sid, I need you to do me a favor. I need you to get in a room by yourself and sit down. We have to have a conversation." And he'll call me out like crazy. The hard part is when you have your peers or your circle, they like, "Oh, that guy right there has two multi-million dollar companies. He's got to figure it out. We don't have to call him out anymore. He's just got it, you know." But the financial aspect of it's great, right? We like that freedom. But when you're doing stuff up here, that's either hurtful or you're not providing the way a man should provide. That money means nothing at all whatsoever. And it's taken me a while to get a circle of men around me that have that realize, hey, just because you make more money than me doesn't mean I'm not going to call you out on your shit. And I'm telling you right now that that's a real issue when you become very, very successful, even in a career. Like, if the chief starts looking like he's a mess, the majority of the guys there aren't going to call that chief out. You know what I mean? And for me, that's like, it's one of my favorite things when I get called out. I freaking love it. Was there anyone that was calling you out during that time, or was it you just like, man, this is just really bad?
No, unfortunately, because the colleagues I had at the time, again, it's like this first responder mentality. Is there's no one holding each other accountable because we're all just vices and addictions in our own way and trying to cope in our own way. And there was not a lot of that for me personally. It was just me kind of having that rock bottom moment a few times when it was just like my wife would say certain things and it was just like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah. The interesting thing that I've been dealing with, I speak about this a lot. I went and spoke with Cody in Spokane, Washington, and I walked into this room of 600 detectives in that region. And you guys, Cody, man, there was 600 police officers there, and all detectives, all older. And I'm going to tell you right now, 95% of them were obese. Um, didn't train, at all. Um, and it was very hard to be effective there because the common theme in the room was, you know, I'm past that point. Like, I'm going to accept the way that I am now.
Right.
And I think ever committing to the fact that you just are what you are is fucking pathetic. It's because, I mean, I applaud Nick K so much. If you look at Nick K, when I first met Nick K, about 2 years before I met Nick K, not he was very out of shape. Now he's in amazing shape, and over the last 6 years, his communication, his love, his direction has changed. If you meet a guy 8 years ago that knew Nick K, he was a fucking asshole. If you meet Nick K now, he's like top 10 favorite dudes that I know. He's just awesome. Um, and and that transformation was not an easy transformation. And if that dude can do it, we can all do it. And my goal when I go to these events now really isn't to affect a room of 600 people. It's to affect one person. And that's really all I care about. If I walk out of there affecting one person, it's a win for me. Um, the and I don't know if you see it in your industry, but you just get stuck in this disgusting hole of like, all right, get up, go to work, come home, drink 5 beers, drive by 5 gyms, not go to one, decide to eat fast food, do that. Now, listen, I'm not going to say that for those detectives, their career's been easy, because the from the policing arena, what I'm seeing is no one wants to be a police officer. They're working 24-hour shifts. They're sleeping in their cars. There's no health and wellness programs. It's very tough. Some of it is really not their fault, but at the same time kind of is, because no one's speaking up over the fact. How do you even go and raise your hand and say, hey, this department's fucked up? Like, is it even a reality, or are you just kind of like brushed under the carpet? Like, what do people do in that community to take that first step to help the person to the right of them? Like, what do you do?
It's just realizing that no one's going to come save you. And that's the realization I came to. I couldn't depend on a department, an administration, a chief, or a coworker to pull me out of the mess that I'd created for myself. We got to institute this methodology and this mindset that you need to initiate your own self rescue in life first, because literally no one's coming to save you but you. And it's your responsibility too. And it's incumbent upon us to take that accountability in life and to step up. And no matter how many years of tenure you have in the service or whatever it was, in law enforcement, the fire service, EMS, it's your responsibility to become a leader in your organization and step up and lead by example, to show the next generation of individuals who are going to end up suffering the same consequences that you did, that there's these pathways to healing and to transform your life, and that you don't need to just become that fat, overweight, obese guy that's using all these vices and addictions to cope with all of those things that they've not learned how to cope with. So we're just failing the future generations of firefighters, police, and paramedics if we're not stepping up in showing the way and shining our light and just being that example.
Is there any pushback from the higher ups in the departments when you're speaking up like that? Did you ever get any like negative feedback of like trying to help somebody in a bad spot or maybe implement something outside of the department to help the fellow guy that's going through it?
Thankfully, not really. In my experience, just in my own little microcosm of this whole thing, the worst thing that I've seen is just administrations and chiefs not really support it financially. They'll give you the like cursory, yeah, I support this thing, but as long as it doesn't cost a lot of money type of answer. So it checks the box again, so that you can say they supported it. But there's a lot of organizations again who are getting better at acknowledging the fact that this stuff's important, that we need to start talking about it. Um, as far as like making it progressive to the point where you're providing therapy services to people, or you're saying, hey, why don't you get your blood work checked? All these different modalities we know exist. We're not there yet.
So you've taken this life experience and you've turned it into I believe after listening to you and your message on social media, um, you've turned this this life experience into what I believe is a passion of yours, which is kind of building a community outside of work, coaching and helping other people. And you speak like it's a very um, detailed and very easy way to understand when you're delivering a message on social media that really grabs attention. Talk to me about what what that's all about, and kind of what that passion is. How do people get involved in working with you or being in your community of others that want to be vulnerable but still are an alpha? Because I'm interested for the viewers to know. I'm always interested for the viewers to know an outlet. Like, just I know you're the type of guy that someone can DM you and say, "I'm going through a hard time. What do I do?" And if you can, you're dropping everything that you have and probably responding to that person. So, talk to us about the entire picture of everything that you're doing outside of being a firefighter right now and helping the community.
So I've transitioned my identity and purpose into trying to serve first responders in a different way. And it goes back into what we talked about, as far as we can't really change the culture within. So we have to create our own culture. And the way that I've been doing that is by creating the Mindfulness Medic. And it's just my way of sharing my journey, the story that I've gone through, the things that I've experienced, and all the tools and the methods that I've used to change and transform my life. Because I think that that's what the most important thing is sharing the tools and the methods. Because we can sit here and talk till we're blue in the face about the philosophical concept of mental health, but it's not helping anyone. We're not doing anything about it. We're just pontificating, and it just turns into a bunch of mental masturbation at that point. So what I needed the most when I was struggling is, okay, what are the things I can do to actually do something about it? And that's what the mindfulness medic is. It's just my way of sharing the things that I've used through my 6 pillars: gratitude, presence, spirituality, family and tribe, fitness, and the financial freedom aspect. And just building that movement within the culture to try to show people that it's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to stay there. And you need to do everything in your power to get yourself out of that situation. Unless you're okay with living a life of hopeless destitution, obese on the couch like I was for so long, you know, these are some things you can do. And I create apparel. I just put that messaging and that inspiration on apparel with the intent of just trying to empower and inspire other people to identify with that hope, that you don't have to live in darkness all the time. That if you were just took the accountability a little bit in your day to lean into that fear and discomfort of being judged and ridiculed and all those normal things we all experience, that you can heal yourself and that it's okay to be happy.
So, with your coaching group, what does one expect to deal with, probably other than brutal honesty when they come aboard to start to work with you?
So the one-on-one coaching, I just help people get the focus and the clarity they need to get on that path. Because a common thing I've found, I get DMs from people all the time. They're just like, I don't know where to start.
Yep.
This all seems super overwhelming. And I think oftentimes we take for granted at our level where we're at, where in our lives, how hard it was to be at that point of just sifting through all this information. I found that with the hormone stuff. So just giving people that springboard, that initial launch point of trying to help organize and prioritize those things they need to do in their life to start getting it in order, to stop looking at this huge picture and getting
Yep.
overwhelmed and just focusing on the micro things they can do every single day to start making those adjustments, those daily adjustments to add value.
People hate change, Jason. Like they hate it, right? So I had a gentleman DM me the other day, and he's like, you make it sound like it's so easy, and I'm like, and I replied back to him, I'm like, what are you doing after work today? And he's like, I don't have any plans. I'm like, well, go for a walk and then call me when you're done with the walk. Tell me how you feel. And he's like, what? I'm like, when was the last time you were on a walk? And he's like, good point. Went for a walk, came back, and he's starting a journey now. Like it's those small little touch points of change that people don't embrace. They fight, and we're all victims of that, right? Like I walk into my office to 75 people, and I'm like, hey guys, we're gonna change our software. I promise you, it's gonna be for the better. Everyone's like, ah, shit, I gotta learn something fucking new. Like this is terrible, and then all of a sudden, it gives us better contact with people. It allows us to document patient charting better. It allows us to have more touch points. And then a month later, everyone's like, oh, this thing's fucking amazing, right? It's the same thing in life. For me, something else that's interesting is, especially in the alpha male population, you have a guy that was a superstar football player in sick shape when he was in high school, right? Went to college, played ball, decides to be a first responder, decides to be a businessman, whatever it is. And their mental image of like what they were before is like something impossible to get to now, because now they're 100 pounds overweight and they're like, God, that journey backwards is going to be crazy. It's possible. It's very, very possible. But living in like what you were before, forget about that. Like just do the best you can now, but you have to do something. And it's really hard to find motivation if you're lazy, right? Those two things, they just don't work hand in hand. So like just those baby steps. And I liked what you say, how you like make things real simple, because we try to do that as much at Core. People don't realize it, but we have different departments because we only want you dealing with one thing at a time. It's okay, speak to an onboarding specialist. Don't worry about the medication. Just get the blood work done. That's it. That's all we care about is the blood work, right? Then what's going to happen is we're going to go through every piece of information on that blood work with you line by line to make sure you understand what's going on. Then we're going to ask you if you have a bunch of questions, and we hope you do. Then there's going to be a protocol. So don't, when people call us, just they're already at the end game of how many medications am I getting? How much is it going to cost? This is crazy. Dude, don't worry about it. There's a chance you might not need anything. There's a chance you might need one thing. But making yourself crazy in any situation, which we deal with a lot, and it is difficult, it's the fear of the unknown is what I like to say is probably one of the biggest mental killers out there. Like, oh my God, I'm going to go on this first date. Is this girl going to like me? Blah, 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 blah. What's it going to be like? Or, I have friends back in Boston that have not left the town I've grown up in 20 years because they're like they're afraid to go like experience the world, like because they don't know what to expect. Well, guess what? Like it's going to be a hell of a lot better than sitting behind that bar stool. So those small things in life, I think there's a lack of people out there that are thinking about like the glass half full, and just making that one little tweak and not trying to take on a huge workload. It's just it's a mental killer. But man, I want to say thank you so much. Like this was awesome, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you again. I know you're going down to the islands this weekend. Is that right? With it,
Yeah, that was a crazy kind of serendipitous moment. Again, just
this is a great
contacts
example
and
right now of coming out of
people
your comfort
made.
zone and doing something exactly going.
Exactly, is exactly what happened. So I met, Seth down at the event this past month, right? The Core Medical Military Appreciation event, and that turned into more opportunities in life. Again, it's just crazy how the dominoes come into your life when you face that fear of growth and you just keep going and you stay positive and you start putting that positive attention into your life. So I got this amazing opportunity to go down to the Heal the Heroes event for Aerial Recovery puts on. So I'm super stoked for that. That's going to be an amazing time. And
Yeah, I mean that. So what's super cool about that, right, is you have like your firefighters, your police officers, you have your like Delta operators, you have your guys that were in a kitchen in Afghanistan that got a bomb dropped on them, like just like and it's the melting pot of community that you're walking into is going to be amazing, like really amazing, and I think the ability for everyone and the relationships you're going to make there are absolutely insane. Um, so this won't air until the news comes out, which will be on Monday. But um, from that event, this is why this event is really cool. The relationships that come from it. So we work with Beyond the Barracks Foundation. They had a bunch of people there that came in, and we're it's a new relationship, and I'm very cautious with foundations. Foundations are very cautious across the board, and she had a couple guys there from the Beyond the Barracks Foundations, and they came back and they were like, that event was unfreaking believable. Like everyone had the common theme. There was no drama. There was more alphas in that room than I've ever seen in my life. Everyone got along, loving, caring, helpful, and they brought an opportunity to the table. Three major home builders are donating 30 homes that Beyond the Barrack and Core Medical now will be giving away to combat veterans and across the United States in about 30 different states over the next 2 years. So Monday, the news is coming live. We'll have registrations open. Their houses are 325 to 680,000 with 60,000 build-out allowances, and it's not for your veteran that is a homeless veteran. They are doing this in a dynamic of, are you a member of society that are helping other people? You can make 500,000 a year. They'll still give you a home. And we're going to be doing that. And I'm like, and that stemmed from that weekend. And it was just unbelievable. It's probably one of my biggest, give back accomplishments that I'll probably ever have in my life. And it's just super, super cool. So, yeah, and then every 7 months or so, registration will open back up again. More houses will be given away. So those are the amazing things that happen when good people come together and treat each other right. And we appreciate you being part of the family. And I hope you have an amazing trip down south with those guys. And let me know how it goes, brother.
yeah, thanks, Sid. I can't thank you enough, and I can't thank Core enough for everything that they've provided me, and I've been able to now provide for my family. So everything you guys are doing is, you're doing the God's work for people. So thank you.
Thank you, brother. Have a safe trip. We'll talk soon, my man.